Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the second part thereof for today, the 28th of October 2025. We're going to talk about military aid to Ukraine predominantly and military developments with both sides in this war. Let's get to it. So we are going to start today with Zelensky saying, I would like to thank the UK and France separately. There is a decision on additional Mirage fighter jets for Ukraine and missiles for air defense. Britain will continue to help us with air defense, also with missiles and the production of interceptor drones. Now, I thought this was interesting. It came on the back of the coalition of willing meeting, and a few days later, I think the UK, I've said this before, is doing an awful lot, and they're trying to help out in terms of missiles. There's a lot of talk about long-range missiles. We're going to come to this in the Ukraine section, near their indigenous production section of this video. And I think Zelensky is very aware, as he must be, of Ukraine's needs. They need planes. They need munitions for those planes. They need long-distance cruise and ballistic missiles, long-distance drones, as well as all the air defense and air defense missiles and stuff. So the UK is playing an important part with interceptor drones. The Octopus project, building up to 2,000 drones a month, is the aim there. We're also going to hear that Ukraine is hoping to make a fair amount of those every single day going forward. So they're really gearing up with, and obviously you've got air defense gearing up so that they can shoot down Shaheds effectively. But really, like I've said to you before, they need to blow up the air bases where these planes are taking off with cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. They need to take out the military industrial complex, the Yelabuga production facility for Shahed drones. They really need to do that rather than put the sticking plaster on shooting down the drones once they've been sent into Ukraine, shooting down the missiles too. So they need to stop them being built, stop them being flown in the case of missiles, or launched in the case of drones, and then final option is take out the drones. So the UK is certainly in a position to help with intercepting both missiles and drones with air defense there. And then France, they're looking to provide Mirage jets, but it's not just Mirages. We are now hearing that they are up for some Rafale jets. Wow. Okay, so this is looking better, but the question is always timing. You know, what is the expected time frame for receiving, say, Gripens? Well, now potentially Rafales as well. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. We're going to start with the France thing. With Ukrainian forces are now using 120 French Caesar self-propelled howitzers on the front line, according to Olivier Travers, the marketing and sales director for KNDS France. And good news, these are very capable bits of kit. They do have quite a large footprint. I guess a little bit easier to see if you are trying to hide them in the bush compared to a smaller towed howitzer. And shoot and scoot isn't as advantageous as it was before, which is when you shoot and then you get out of dodge because 3 minutes later you can expect counter battery fire. Well, actually, the Russians don't really have that much counter battery fire anymore. In other words, measuring the trajectory of the shell using radar technology and whatnot, and then getting the exact location of where the shell came from and then firing back with your own howitzers. Rather, they rely, both sides, I think, rely much more on drones hunting out howitzers with thermal imaging and heat signatures, or seeing the puff of smoke, or seeing them drive, right? And seeing these big self-propelled howitzers drive is, you know, unfortunately makes them quite the easy target. So there are advantages to Caesar and Archers and Susannas, and we're going to look at Dieters as well. And there are also obviously disadvantages too. They need the full range of static sort of towed howitzers as well as self-propelled ones, right? Talking about Dieters, so I thought it was a good time to bring this in. So soldiers of the 41st Separate Mechanized Brigade have received the latest 155mm wheeled self-propelled artillery, the Dieter, in their arsenal. They wrote a radio dictation of national unity sitting on the cockpit of their Dieter gun. So just, I think, well, so the Dieters are made in Slovakia. And I'm wondering if these were, if I remember correctly, funded by the Dutch. Anyway, this falls under the 152mm Dana gun. Well, actually, this won't be 152. So this is a variant of the Dana gun it's a self-propelled howitzer designed and built in the former Czechoslovakia, now Slovakia, introduced in the 1970s, but now it is obviously a long time later, and there are many different variants of these. So you get the Dana, you get the versions of them, then you get the Susanna and the Susanna 2. So these are what have been provided to Ukraine by the Slovakians. I think they were bought. I don't know who put the money up for them. It's a 155 mil shell, a 41 kilometer range, 51.5 with other munitions. So they got some of them, but I have a feeling they've stopped making the Susanna now. There was a decision recently. There were some, not complaints, but they weren't as good for the Ukrainians. I think they needed more crew, and the position of the crew was too dangerous. So if it got hit, you're more likely to blow up, because I think your crew positioning was close to the auto loader or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm fairly sure that was a discussion that was recently had. And then you've got the Dita here, and I don't know how much this is different to the Susanna 2, but this is a 155 mil howitzer, again, 6 rounds per minute, including multiple round simultaneous impact. So what multiple round archers do this as well. I don't know, Caesars probably do this too, where I presume what you do is you fire around at a higher trajectory, so it goes kind of more steeply up, then you fire around straight away afterwards at slightly lower trajectory, and then one at a lower one, but maybe with more force or something like that. Essentially, all 3 rounds land at the same time at the same place, which that's, as I understand it, I probably got that wrong, but you get the idea that it can fire a bunch of rounds and then they simultaneously hit for added impact, rather than landing and then, oh my goodness, we're being attacked, let's get out of dodge. And then by the time the next round comes in, although they fire pretty quickly, right? They can fire 6 rounds in a minute. So it gives you 10 seconds to it's not that long to get out of dodge. But, if all 3 are hitting simultaneously, then you've got a greater chance of destroying what you're looking to destroy. Anyway, Dita there, which has a crew of 2. I presume that's a crew, crew. So that's pretty incredible. The Susanna has a crew of 4, so that's another thing. So the Archer was preferable because that's got fewer crew, and the Dita here just a crew of 2 minimum, plus you can have an extra 1. So that's going to Ukraine. They're getting those in Ukraine, so that's excellent there. Just going to look at Ukraine. So Dana, an unknown number of VZ-77 were supplied by the Czech Republic in 2022, so they did get some of those. Dana M2, 26 M2 were ordered by Ukraine in 2020. An unknown number of M2 was supplied by the Czech Republic in 2022. Now, Susanna 2, here we go. Slovak Defense Ministry announced the donation of 8 Susanna 2. Now, they were delayed. It took them ages to get these, with delivery being completed as of January 2023. I don't think that's true. I think, Germany, Norway, and Denmark all agreed to purchase further 16 Susanna 2 for delivery in Ukraine in 2023. It's those ones that took absolutely ages to get there. So it doesn't talk about the delivery there, but I think they were only just recently, like 2025, before they actually got them. And then Dita here, it was a Dutch. So Netherlands has financed purchase of 9 Dita self-propelled howitzers for Ukraine in February 2024, all of which have been delivered in the summer of 2024. Another 6 Dita have been purchased by the Netherlands on behalf of Ukraine in October of the same year. And I presume, that's what they've possibly just received then. So anyway, a bit of information there on those self-propelled howitzers. Right. Zelensky said Ukraine plans to receive up to 250 new aircraft. So we know that 100 to 150 Gripens are going to be a mix of Gripen CDs, because they're going to be receiving those in 2026, and then Gripen Es that they'll receive off the assembly line in 3 years' time plus. So then there will be another 100, which will be made up of F-16s and Rafale. This is new news. So you thought this would probably happen, because if you're the French, you're going to be like, right, we want Ukraine to buy our weapons, and the Americans are going to be, no, we want them to buy ours, and the Swedes are going to be like, no way, Gripen. So how do you get Rafales to be ordered by the Ukrainians, will you get them in on the Mirage 2005F, get them some of these old ones, keep them in the kind of French ecosystem, get them in there, get them in quick, because, hey, we can get them these Mirage 2005Fs much more quickly than we can get the Rafales. They're probably long waiting list because India are ordering a whole bunch of Rafales and other countries. But it's probably the case that the Mirage was a way into the Rafales. Fascinating, and I wonder when they will be able to get hold of the Rafales of Ukrainians. Ukraine is in talks with France to get Rafale fighter jets, according to Zelensky. The plan is to build a new air fleet around Rafales, Gripens, and F-16s to replace the Soviet MiGs. And obviously, they're operating the F-16s fairly well at the moment. The Gripens seem to be on the way imminently. Just trying to see if there's any more news here. Amid the ongoing Russia-Ukrainian war, Ukrainian fighter jet fleet includes Soviet-era MiG-29s, US-made F-16s. Actually, I don't think they're all US-made. I think some of them were made in Europe. I'm sure there is localized manufacturing of some of the F-16s. Anyway, French-supplied Mirage 2005 Fs and Swedish Jazz 39 Gripens expected to join soon. This diverse mix, driven by wartime necessity, complicates both logistics and maintenance. Responding to the Ukrinform question, Zelensky said Ukraine is conducting, quote, 3 parallel conversations regarding aircraft with the Swedes, with the French, and with the Americans. He reminded us that the modernization plan for Ukraine's Air Force is based on 3 key fighter platforms, the F-16, the Gripen, and the Rafale. Militiani notes back in 2021, a year before Russia's full-scale invasion, French President Emmanuel Macron reportedly planned to propose Rafale jets to Ukraine to replace the Soviet-era MiG-29s during his visit to Kyiv. No further details of the initiative were made public, but the topic has now returned to the agenda. Rafale, produced by Dassault Aviation, is a 4th plus generation multi-role. So you get these different generation fighters. Now we're up to 6th generation kind of super stealth fighters or whatever. That they're US is going to be creating the F-47, and then you've got the FCAS and these other ones, the Tempest, that are being made by European nations. But then you have the 5th generation before that. So the F-35, I think it's 5th generation. Then you've got the Su-57, but then people argue about really how good is a Su-57. The 4th plus, like, these are capable. They might not have stealth, but actually some are arguing how much do you need stealth? Because in the way that they're being used, it's a luxury that you don't need to pay for. So actually, people are saying, look, you can use Gripens, you can use Eurofighter Typhoons, you can use Rafales to do, a lot of this heavy lifting and a lot of the sorts of bombing raids and whatnot that they're using these planes for these days. So it's capable of performing all types of combat missions. One of its major advantages is the capacity to use a long-range Meteor air-to-air missile developed by MBDA Consortium. Same, of course, with the Gripen 2. According to Ukrinform, Zelensky called the Swedish Gripen attractive for its lower maintenance cost, shorter pilot training period, interesting, and ability to operate from roads. He added that Ukraine and Sweden agreed to localize Gripen production. We're going to talk about that in a second, describing that step as a historic agreement. Zelensky noted the overall demand for new combat aircraft is around 250 planes, with 150 Gripen fighters already agreed in principle. The ongoing talks with France place Rafales along Gripens and F-16s as one of the 3 cornerstone aircraft in Ukraine's future air power structure. Okay, so then on to the Gripens again, third military aid video. I'm going to be talking about them in some depth. Sweden's Saab is considering building a new production hub for the Jazz 39E and F Gripen fighters to support a major Ukrainian Air Force deal. Am I correct in saying the E has a crew of 1, F has a crew of 2? For different roles. Anyway, Gripen fighters to support a major Ukrainian Air Force deal, at least 100 jets. Due to capacity limits in Sweden, a new line is needed. They do have a line in Brazil, but I don't know if that's going to be called into action to support Ukraine. Analysts suggest the facility could be opened in Ukraine. So Saab is discussing extra production hub to support Ukrainian Gripen purchase. Here's what Nexta has to say. This is a Belarusian, I think they're exiled news agency. Sweden's Saab is to build a plant in Ukraine for Gripen fighter jet assembly. The CEO of Swedish defense company Saab, Mikael Johansson, announced readiness to establish a facility in Ukraine for the assembly and testing of Gripen fighter jets. Quote, "It would be great to set up capabilities in Ukraine for at least for final assembly and testing, and possibly for partial production," Johansson told the Financial Times. He noted that the potential deal with Ukraine could double Saab's production needs. The company is already expanding its facilities in Brazil to produce up to 30 aircraft per year. Interesting. So that's where they're getting an expanded production output. I thought they're also expanding their Swedish manufacturing too. Johansson also suggested using frozen Russian assets to help finance the project. Earlier, Ukraine and Sweden signed a preliminary agreement for the delivery of 100 Gripen fighter jets of a new modification. So it could well be 100 Gripen E's and 50 Gripen CDs, which would be much more imminent in their delivery. But of course, it would be great is a long distance from, yeah, we're going to do it and we know what we're doing and where we're doing it. So, bear that in mind. And the final bit on the Gripens here, JP Lindsley, I met him. We had some wine, drank wine together in a hostel in Kiev. Anyway, he says Ukrainian fighter pilot Vadim Voroshilov says Sweden's Gripen is, quote, "the only fighter jet in the world I'd sell my soul for. Stockholm and Kiev have struck a deal on this workhorse Swedish fighter. Here's why the Gripen is so vital for Ukraine. Most of you know all this. Let's just go through it again, just because we can. Sweden and Ukraine have signed that deal, as we already know, with manufacturer Saab even open to final assembly work in Ukraine if the deal lands. While American fighter jets are seen as the gold standard, ace pilot Vadim prefers Gripen. Gripens are less delicate than F-16s and F-35s. Russia shreds Ukraine's runways with bombs and drones. Gripen's air intakes sit higher on the fuselage, so it's less likely to swallow debris. This is called foreign object debris, FOD. And if the runways aren't sort of perfect, the F-16s will suck them up because their air intake is just below the cockpit front fuselage, and so it's basically sucking up whatever's on the runway in front of the F-16. So you have to have really clean runways. Taking off from roads and short runways and places that have been attacked and aren't in perfect condition is is something that the Gripens are much more used to doing. So Gripen's air intakes sitting higher on the fuselage mean that they are less likely to suck in that FOD. So you can see, like the F-16, the fuselage sits here, basically, if I remember correctly, where it doesn't with the Gripens. Gripen's built to fight without big air bases. It's to launch from short road strips, refuel right there, even with the engine on, then move to the next site. A small ground team can turn it around fast and get it back in the air. So it needs a smaller team. It needs less maintenance. The maintenance hours per flight hour is much more preferable. It really is, better for a lot of reasons than, say, the F-16 and other planes. Although, it will have its limitations in other ways. A Gripen, I forget what the range is for the Gripen. That might be a limitation. A Gripen can be turned in around 10 minutes. Fuel and weapons as per Saab. The F-16 hot pit refuels often get a jet back up in around just under 30 minutes, about 15 minutes fueling and quick checks. Less time parked is safer for the jet and the crew. Weapon adaptability. Gripen can carry both US and European missiles and smart bombs. That means Ukraine can draw from a wider pool of munitions, more options, more shots, fewer bottlenecks. Quote, Gripen also has a hot refuel option, writes Vadim, refueling on the ground with the engine running, which for me personally is, I need this stuff. Essentially, when you start getting the alert that a ballistic missile is in the air, or that the Tupolev strategic bombers are in the air ready to drop those things, you need to get your planes up in the air, because they are invariably going to be going for the air bases. Khmelnytsky is a famous one that they go for. It's probably where the F-16s and Mirages and whatnots are. Those alerts come in, you get that plane up quickly. So the fact that you can refuel this jet when it has its engine on is a real advantage. It has a lower cost to fly, which means that you can do more flying, Vadim says, we must think about what comes next. His rough compare, Gripen is 5 to 8,000 per hour versus a MiG-29, $10 to $15,000 per hour. Wow. So the Gripen is lower than the MiG-29 in terms of hourly cost to run, to fly. Lower cost means more training and more sorties. So you don't have to pick and choose your sorties. You can just you can fly double the sorties there, like 5 to 8,000 versus 10 to 15,000. So at best, that is like 3 times cheaper. So you can technically do 3 times more. Well, obviously the cost of munitions then is thrown on there, and it's probably got more costly munitions, I would have thought, but I don't know about that. Anyway, Vadim calls the Gripen the smart fighter, balanced combat capability, economy, and modern avionics, built for exactly what Ukraine faces: difficult takeoffs, constant strikes, and the need to do more with less. Thank you to everyone who lobbied for this, Vadim writes. Ukraine and Sweden showing smart tech can outwit and outpunch a mighty tyranny. So good thread there from JP Lindsay. So thank you. Right. Now we're going to go on to what can be launched. Actually, I think these are ground launched, to be fair. I was going to say what can be launched from these planes. I don't know. We'll see whether they can be plane launched. I don't think they can anyway. Right, what's the news here? Well, Poland is to localize the production of American Barracuda 500 cruise missiles. That is pretty good news. Why is it good news for Ukraine? Well, the simple fact of the matter is this is exactly what Ukraine want and need. Right, it is cheap and cheerful and effective, I think. Right, Poland to localize production of American Barracuda 500 cruise missiles. Poland plans to produce and set up production of American Barracuda 500 cruise missiles modified to meet its needs. Tomasz Dmytryk, editor of the Polish military publications, announced this in on his X account. According to him, an agreement is scheduled to be signed on October the 27th between the Polish company Polska Grupa, and a lot of letters there that I can't pronounce, and the American firm Anduril. Now, I think, unfortunately, Anduril, is that not owned by Peter Thiel, who is someone I despise with all of my fibers? So I do have some cognitive dissonance going on here. Anyway, the purpose of which will be, among other things, to produce a Polish modified version of the Barracuda 500 cruise missile. Okay. So Militrani reports Barracuda 500 is not a traditional cruise missile, but rather a jet-powered drone, a carrier platform for various types of combat payloads, reconnaissance equipment, or electronic warfare system. They are installed on board before a mission, depending on the type of task and the role of each Barracuda 500 within a larger group. And we are starting to see this. So this is me now. Things like the Peklo drone, which is Ukrainian for hell, that is often called a drone missile, because you get these kind of hybrid weapons that don't quite fit in one category or the other, and it's just the nature of categorization, right? But hey, it's a thing that you fire, it goes a long way and it blows up. So I call them blowy up things. All of them are blowy up things. So where were we? The Barracuda 500M variant, equipped with a warhead, is essentially a small cruise missile with a flight range of over 500 nautical miles, so more than 926 kilometers. Okay, so that's a 1,000-kilometer range almost for a cruise missile, and a payload capacity exceeding approximately 45 kilograms. So it doesn't have a massive punch, right? If you're talking about an Iskander-M missile, is that what a ballistic missile? Is that 450 kilograms, something like that? So maybe 10 times bigger in terms of explosive punch. But it is capable of performing maneuvers with up to 5G of overload and had a flight endurance of more than 120 minutes. Anduril claims that the maximum speed of all Barracuda types, which are powered by small turbojet engines, is up to 500 knots. So that's 926 kilometers per hour, depending on launch mode and other factors. The production cost, and this is the key, right? The production cost of a single serial platform is expected to be no more than $150,000, which is significantly less than conventional cruise missiles. So while the payload is smaller, it is definitely cheap. They have successfully got because this hitting an oil refinery, where the combustible material is going to do the job of like burning the place down. You don't necessarily need a Flamingo with 1,150 kilograms of explosive warhead. Actually, if this costs an awful lot less, then use a whole bunch of these, maybe 5 of these, to hit that same. I don't know what the cost differential is, but imagine using 5 of these to hit 5 different places in a refinery rather than a bigger one to hit one place. And you're going to do, I think, more damage. So this is really, an exciting proposal. The Barracuda 500. So the production cost of a single serial platform not expected to be any more than $150,000, which is relatively cheap. Initially, these missiles were developed for air launch. See, I thought it was ground launch because all the images I see are ground launch. But in September 2025, Anduril conducted tests of the Barracuda 500 launched from a ground-based launcher. The company said the tests took place earlier in the year and are part of a broader internally funded program to further develop Barracuda's capabilities in a ground-based version. The launch solid propellant rocket motor is designed as a simple modular kit that attaches to the missile's tail. Anduril developed this module so that it is compatible with various motors that could be supplied by US manufacturers or by industrial firms in allied countries. Poland will not be the first country outside the US to set up production of these missiles. In September, it was reported that Taiwan is also pursuing this. At that time, the National Chung-Shan Institute of Science and Technology said it plans to mass produce the missile in Taiwan through technology transfer. These could be a seriously good answer for Ukraine. Honestly, lots of people are talking about them at the moment. So a Polish mass-produced ALCM, air launch cruise missile, obviously air launch, is only a matter of time. We'll see if it ends up being this one or another design, said Fabian Hoffman, who's a missile expert. So Poland need an air launch cruise missile, and here is one that Anduril is offering. While Russia currently holds a significant advantage in the missile domain, we are inevitably moving toward a future in which it will be surrounded by neighbors, each fielding hundreds, if not thousands, of conventional missiles aimed at high-value Russian military and economic targets. This will make for interesting crisis dynamics as Russia's vulnerability to conventional counter-strike and counter-value strategies increases exponentially year over year. Okay, this is how I see it. So Russia started this war in Ukraine, and it was ridiculous, and it was a stupid decision because I think garbage in, garbage out. See my video the other day where I don't think Putin had enough quality intelligence on Ukraine to make the right decision, and he thought they were going to capitulate immediately and you would get a regime change. It didn't happen. 4 years later, still at war. Oh dear, miscalculation. And what's happened then is 2 nations, neighboring nations to Russia, have now joined NATO. Poland, Ukraine, and those Nordic nations are tooling up big time. You are getting Gripen E's coming out in Sweden. You're going to get Rafales, Gripens, and F-16s flying around Ukraine, and they're going to be equipped with decent munitions. And you've got Poland absolutely spending a fortune on their armed forces. They're now well above the United States in percentage of GDP being spent on defense. So they're leading the pack in terms of defense spending, pretty much, the Polish, getting a load of stuff from South Korea, a bunch of stuff from the US, HIMARS and all sorts of things coming from all over the place. They're going to want to be developing their own cruise missiles or getting them in cheaply from the US here. This is a great option, although it's not a huge payload, as mentioned. Now, you've got Taurus, maybe Taurus Neo, is it? The updated version of the Taurus. And you've got Storm Shadow and Scalp PGs, what's going on with them. But yeah, you have options that are needed for NATO and European nations that are now back on the table. Everyone realizing that cruise missiles and ballistic missiles are a necessary component of modern warfare, obviously, but the Ukraine war is telling us that this is about drones and it's about missiles, and tool yourself up with all sorts, and you're halfway there. So yeah, I think this missile could play a part, or ones like it. So we know that the UK has just recently put out a tender to cheat for people to build cheap, I think, ballistic missiles and cruise missiles that can do a job kind of like this, right? Cheap and cheerful, but decent bit of kit. So if Ukraine can get their hands on those, $150,000 a pop, I would have thought that's pretty attractive for allies to get hold of these for Ukraine. Right. Okay. As Yoni Ascola then says, it's time for Trump to allow Anduril to sell Barracudas to Ukraine. Europe can finance the purchases and the deal wouldn't deplete US stocks. Absolutely. Poland reportedly to sign a deal with Anduril for the procurement and production of Barracuda 500 missiles, as was already mentioned. So, yeah, now's the time for Ukraine to get hold of these. Okay, moving on from that topic, we'll go on to Germany, and Ukraine has decided on the main infantry fighting vehicle for its own production. It will be the KF-41 Lynx from German company Rheinmetall. We've known this is going to be the case. They're supposed to be building these already in Ukraine. There is a production facility in Hungary that has built them the prototype that, well, not prototype, but the one for the Ukrainians to test. I think they went back to the drawing board because they needed some changes to it or something. But according to the Defense Network, the first Lynx manufactured in Hungary arrived in Ukraine in late 2024 for testing. So yeah, that's the one that I think, it showed that they needed some extra adaptations to. Last week at a meeting in a Ramstein format, the defense ministers of Ukraine and Germany signed an agreement that provides for the creation of a joint production of Lynx in Ukraine. Rheinmetall plans to open the plant by the end of 2025. So we've heard this promise before, but it's looking much more imminent. That's really good news. There are essentially two elements to what Ukraine produced that are missing from their kind of inventory, their production inventory. One, infantry fighting vehicles. Two, tanks. I don't know that I would bother too much thinking about tanks, but it would be very useful to get infantry fighting vehicles that are capable of doing a really good job. I think, the way that Bradleys have been used, it would be great if, I don't know what the Lynx capabilities are like. Like, obviously, it's got a pretty decent turret that looks fairly similar to the Skynex turret. And since it's Rheinmetall, you'd imagine it probably is very similar. But I wonder if it can have ATGMs placed on top, like the Bradleys have got the TOW missiles, the optically wired missiles that can take out tanks pretty effectively. It would be great if this has a similar. So, are they not loading it up? Should we have a look rather than just talk about it? Lynx IFV. I had a feeling they might have the ATGM on board from the Israelis, but I might be wrong on that. So armor, main armament, lance turret, 30 mil, blah, 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 autocannon, secondary armament, light machine gun. Yes, here we go. I was right. Spike LR2 ATGM. So Spike, I'm positive, is the Israeli ATGM, anti-tank guided missile. So it has an option to have that on board, which I think would be absolutely vital for the Ukrainians. They would need some kind of anti-tank munition on there. So Ukraine, in 2023, Rheinmetall announced Ukraine expressed interest in the Lynx KF-51. On December the 1st, Reuters reported that Rheinmetall was aiming to begin production of the vehicle by late 2024. That obviously hasn't happened. The initiative was confirmed during the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Berlin in 2024. It was announced that Ukraine would soon receive its first KF-41 Lynx. In October 2024, it was announced that the production of the KF-41 Lynx was started in Ukraine. In January 2025, it was announced that the first KF-41 Lynx was delivered to Ukraine in late 2024 for field testing. So that's come from Hungary. So are they getting the 41 rather than the 51 now? I don't know. So let's look. The 41. This model has displayed for the first time, blah, 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 blah. It's powered by an 850 kilowatt, 1,140 horsepower engine. Has a top speed of 70 kilometers an hour, 43 miles per hour. So that's pretty decent. But it doesn't dictate. It can carry a crew of 3 plus 8 passengers. It doesn't dictate what munitions it has on it. So I guess it could have either. That's what I was wanting to know. Anyway, there you go. a bit on the infantry fighting vehicle. So yeah, if they can provide them in Ukraine, that would be so useful for them. What else? So German aid to Ukraine, staying on the German topic, says the following images show a recently conducted training exercise with a German delivered Marder 1A3 infantry fighting vehicle with the 36th Marine Brigade. As usual in Ukraine, the Marder 1A3 IFV has received additional grille protection, a drone cage, and has a camouflage net on top, as you would expect. I was listening to some talk the other day. It was from the Sky News video on that amazing well, I'd say mission. It's ended up being a number of different missions around Prokrovsk, around the Dobropilia area. And I think was it from that one where the tank commander was talking about how important, it might not have been actually, how important these grills are. They used to laugh at them at the beginning of the war as cope cages, because they were laughable when they were cope cages, because they were kind of using them, if you like. Well, no. So the cope cages were initially designed to stop ATGM. To stop like grenade launchers and RPGs. And I don't think they did a particularly amazing job of that, but slightly better than what they ended up not being used for. But they had cope cages on for that. And the Ukrainians started using ATGM, so anti-tank guided missiles like the Javelins and the NLAWs. The cope cages did nothing against them, because these are top-down munitions that are really, really powerful, and they just, they make, it's short work of cope cages, right? But when it comes to drones, the cope cages have then found their niche again, where they are genuinely useful in protecting against drones that have much smaller munitions. They're a bit more like mosquitoes rather than a golden eagle, compared to the NLAWs and the Javelins and whatnot. And so these cope cages do a job. Anyway, good to see German kit there being used by the Ukrainians on the training ground. Germany, in cooperation with Denmark, has officially delivered a total of 140 Marder 1A3s, lost a fair few of them, to Ukrainians, pledged to deliver another 25. However, their delivery was to be completed in the first half of 2025. So we can assume that the publicly known commitments have already been fulfilled. And yeah, moving on, Croatia has allocated the 14th package of military aid to Ukraine, and the 15th is currently being prepared, said Zelensky. In addition, Kyiv and Zagreb are expanding defense industrial cooperation. And it's that last point which is worthy of note. So Ukraine and Croatia have agreed on joint production of weapons. Lots of nations doing this. We've heard about it with the Lynx infantry fighting vehicle, and indeed things like interceptor drones and all sorts. So in early 2026, Ukraine and Croatia will hold a joint industrial forum of defense manufacturers. This is really important for Ukraine. It's a very clever way of getting continued support from nations that are, in that part of the world where you're not guaranteed continued support. So you've got Hungary, you've got Slovakia, and you've got Czechia apparently now. So we've just heard from Viktor Orban that he wants to start a new group of countries who are anti-Ukraine, and it's going to be Hungary, Czechia, and Slovakia because of the new Czech election results and Andrej Babiš and whatnot. So this is not good news for Ukraine. So one way of getting around that is by, and this is kind of what's happened with Slovakia and Robert Fico. It's like, we don't want to give you military aid from a governmental point of view, but we're happy to sell it to you. And so, if you can start doing these economic and industrial deals with countries, then you're much more likely to get continued support for them, because it's in their best kind of financial interest to do so, economic interest to do so. Now, Estonia has allocated an additional 150,000 to support Ukraine's energy system ahead of winter, according to Foreign Minister Margus Tsakna. He's announced that during his visit to Kyiv just the other day. This brings Estonia's energy aid to around 850,000 euros, which is great news. And then we have the Netherlands allocating 25 million euros to support Ukraine's energy system, according to their foreign minister, who's in, I think, Ukraine today. These funds will be used to purchase gas and equipment, as well as emergency repairs. Continued support from Netherlands has been just brilliant. Now, Oh, what's the film called with? Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to go and look this up. This is it. Well worth watching this actually. War Dogs, because a true story, absolutely fascinating. It's a Jonah Hill movie. You'll know him from like Superbad and stuff like that. And is he 21 Jump Street as well? The remake. Anyway, whatever. War Dogs. So it's a true film about pretty much exactly what has just seemed to have happened again at the beginning of the Ukraine war. So we hear that, okay, a modest gun shop on a strip mall in southern Arizona secured an unlikely order in 2022. $1 billion of ammunition for Ukraine, according to the Financial Times. Honestly, this is so similar to War Dogs. The contract came from Ukrainian arms agency and covered an armory of rockets and shells so big that on paper it was worth more than Estonia's annual defense budget. And the article here is titled "How a Tiny US Gun Shop Won and Botched a $1 billion Ukraine Contract." So, but retailer OTL Firearms, based in a dusty single-story building on the edge of Tucson, had no export record, no large storage facility, and no expertise to take state-scale orders. Again, that's a film of War Dogs. It's exactly what happened in that film. Ukraine wired 17 million euros up front, but never received a single round of ammunition from OTL's then 30-year-old owner. Now, a US federal judge has ordered OTL to repay the full sum plus interest and legal fees, bringing its liability to more than $20 million. Yes, here you got Jonah Hill in War Dogs there. That is like, yeah, exactly the right gift to put there. So yeah, just go and watch a film if you want an idea of what might have happened here. Right now, just as an aside, it's interesting that the UK has just done a deal with Erdogan and Turkey, and you might say that's controversial. They are a NATO ally. They do have aspirations for the EU, and they are doing deals now for F-16s, and they want F-35s from the US. So obviously, you know, Europe in terms of the Eurofighter with Germany, UK, and who else is it? Is it Spain? You know, are going to want to get the Eurofighter Typhoon uh, to Turkey, and indeed they've just done a deal for 20 Eurofighter Typhoons that will first delivery is expected in 2030. So it goes to show that these planes, they do last a long time. That's another 5 years away, right? 4.5 years away or whatever. And that's when they'll first get these Eurofighter Typhoons, which will be quite long in the tooth by then. But obviously, with midlife updates and all sorts and new variants coming out, then they are still going to be something that Turkey is going to want. And that is an £8 billion deal for those 20 Eurofighter Typhoons. And I think that's 8 billion for the UK. I don't know who else gets whatever other money, £8 billion. I'm sure Starmer was talking about that. So interesting, and Starmer has actually, or the UK has done a good job of procuring quite a few big contracts in the military industrial complex sphere, because this is important for the UK. We are struggling economically, and my goodness, we need as much business as we can get. So those warships coming from Norway, massive deal on those. You've got Eurofighter Typhoons, and I think was there not another Eurofighter Typhoon? Are we having some, or Germany's having some more or something? Anyway, it's just good news in general for our military industrial complex and our industry in the UK. And obviously we've got the Ukraine war and acting as a kind of a bit of an economic stimulus, I guess. And then you have the kind of reverse happening, where Ukraine is setting up a 200 million pound or dollar or euro, I don't know which one, enterprise in Suffolk to build drones too. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that one in there. Right. Our long range, so this is going on to indigenous manufacturing in Ukraine. Our long range Flamingo and Ruta missiles have been used in combat. We're doing everything we can to test them, not just once, 2 or 3 times this year, but to really test them, says Zelensky. So they have tested them. And indeed, there is a latest bit of footage that has come out of a Flamingo missile flying over Moscow. So Russian channels have shown footage of what they say was a Ukrainian Flamingo missile sailing over Moscow the night before last. So 2 nights ago. It's not known what became of it, but it's clear that these Flamingos are being used. Now, how many are they building a day? I don't know. I'd love to know. The claim last I heard was it was 2 a day. It was initially 1 a day, supposed to be up to 2 a day, and then eventually was it 7 a day? But I don't know that they're going to be able to do that due to, I think, facilities being hit probably by the Russians. In fact, on this topic, Visioner states that the state order for the Ukrainian nationally produced winged missile Flamingo will be fully completed by the end of the year. That's actually Zelensky saying that. Quote, there was a technological problem in the production of the Flamingos. There was a delay in funding from partners, which is now being resolved, and the problem is being addressed. I imagine there was a technological problem in the production of Flamingos is probably the facility was hit with a ballistic missile. To be perfectly frank, Russia are going to be wanting to take this facility out. That is for sure. And he's also claiming that there was a funding gap too, and that's been resolved or is now being resolved. They need as many of those damn missiles as they can get their hands on. Right. Zelensky says every staff, and this goes back to what I was saying, that it's all about long-range missiles. It really is all about long-range missiles, and it's frustrating it's taken so long to get to this point where they are now developing cruise missiles and hopefully ballistic missiles. Every staff meeting, says Zelensky, I will personally check progress on long-range weapons contracts as part of our future security. Long-range capability is a pillar of independence and peace. All deep strike goals must be fulfilled by year end, including expanded geographic use. What he means there is expanding the range of these missiles so that they can blow up Yellow-Booga. That's what I read there. Like, we want to blow up Yellow-Booga Shahed manufacturing facility. And by the end of this year, we need the freaking missiles to do that. And not only the capability, but the capacity in manufacturing. We need to scale production hugely. Those Flamingos, we're testing, yeah. But we need 7 of them a day being built. Bish, bash, bosh. Or, yeah. 210 of those being sent a month, you're going to know about it. So freaking important. So by the end of the year, Ukraine plans to produce 500 to 800 interceptor drones per day. This goes back to the other issue they have, which is shooting down those drones. That's what I said. So 2,000 interceptors from the UK a month, 500 to 800 a day by the end of this year in Ukraine. And then whatever, Germany, France, whatever other countries are helping out with interceptor drones, whatever they can produce too. He noted that there is a shortage of operators for such drones in Ukraine. That's the first I've heard about that, but that doesn't surprise me at all, because for having 500 to 800 interceptor drones a day, you're going to be sending 500 to 800 interceptor drones, and well, that's just the Ukrainian ones. Let's take into account all the other ones. Let's just say 1,000 drones a day. Let's say each team is going to send up, I don't know, 3 drones, and I don't know if that's the case. Maybe each team sends up only 1 drone on a given Shahed. Yeah, okay. So how many teams are you going to need to operate these interceptor drones? You're probably talking thousands of people just for interceptor drones. This is a relatively new thing, right? You've got Gepard teams and anti-aircraft system teams, whether it be Patriots or NASAMS or Iris-T or SAMP-T or the British Ravens, Gepard and ZSU 31 or whatever they are, machine guns. Then you've got interceptor drones. It's a whole new area, this, and they're already low on the ground for troops to be mobilized. I guess for this, like, you're much more likely to be able to attract people way behind the lines, like around Kyiv and around Lviv and around wherever, operating these interceptor drones. You're much more likely to have people say, yeah, actually, I'll join the army now. Yeah, I'm up for that, because I don't want to die on the front lines in a trench with trench foot and not having eaten for a week and blah blah blah. We just sit around Poltava flying up these bad boys. That's going to be much more attractive. Obviously, I'm sort of belittling. You get the idea that they're going to need a lot of these teams, but hopefully they shouldn't have too much trouble recruiting. And actually, like I've said to you many times before, that can be done by men, women, older people, people with amputated legs. That's a sort of job I'm fairly sure that most people can do. A really, fairly narrow job of like setting up these interceptor drones, firing them off when you need to. And I don't know if it's AI does the rest or whether you have to fly them or whatever, but it's something you can do if you've got a prosthetic leg, right? I'm pretty sure. Anyway, I'm sort of waffling now, but on to Anton Groshenko, who says, I recently read an interesting article by a journalist and one of the founders of the Babel online outlet, Gleb Husiev, who spent 3 days with a group that created the Hornich drone. Now, this is a drone I showed you the other day that was taking off from a runway. And I was saying it was just quite interesting because they're driving in a vehicle behind it and it looked like a light aircraft. And I don't know if it was one I was saying was maybe the A-22 Foxbat or whatever. It ends up not being that. I think it was this one where I said it was the light aircraft, the A-22 Foxbat. It's not that. It's actually a different one. And there's this article in Babel, and I'm going to go through it. So the Hornich drone is a modified French Sky Ranger ultralight aircraft. Ukrainian engineers and light aircraft enthusiasts have turned into a formidable weapon. They removed the pilot seat from the Sky Ranger, added an auxiliary fuel tank, batteries, navigation and communication systems, hardpoints for munitions. The Hornich has gained the ability to carry OFAB 100 to 120 fragmentation high explosive aerial bombs, which is about 40 kilograms of explosives, or the more powerful OFAB 250, which is 100 kilograms of explosives, as well as 120 millimeter mortar bombs. So remember I showed you the picture of the bomb underneath with 2 mortar bombs either side of it. Just more stuff to blow up, right, when it crashes. The drone's hit precision reaches 1 meter and its flight range is up to 1,000 kilometers. So the precision reaches 1 meter. In other words, its circle error probable is 1 meter. That's insanely accurate. The uniqueness of the Hornich lies in its ability to navigate through GPS-spoofed zones and evade Russia's air defense systems, such as the Pantsir S-1, the Buk, and the S-300. It can return and land autonomously. Oh my goodness! Right. So actually, what it's doing is dropping those bombs. It is essentially, or it can probably do both, right? Which is either be, if you want to get 1,000 kilometers, that bad boy's not coming back. If you want to get 300 kilometers, you can bring it back. But of course, you've got a huge risk of dropping some bombs and then getting back again over air defense. Anyway, for 2 years now, although I guess when it comes the other way, Russians might think, oh, it's one of our own. For 2 years now, the group led by the commander with the call sign Hornich has been striking strategic targets in Russia. He does not disclose his real name for security reasons. Before the full-scale invasion, Hornich worked in a business far removed from war. During the pandemic, he became interested in light aircraft and obtained a pilot's license. In spring 2022, he volunteered for the front, served in the territorial defense, then in the special operations forces, and later moved to the 14th UAS regiment, so unmanned aerial systems regiment. His unit is now focused on strategic drone strikes with ranges of up to several hundred kilometers. The drone was named after his call sign. The Hornich group was able to create an unmanned aircraft for deep strikes and carry out successful missions thanks to many factors, from administrative backing and freedom of action granted by the commander to intelligence and special equipment from partner countries. The entire group is made up of light aircraft enthusiasts. The drone's missions are not disclosed. What can be seen, however, is their results: burning Russian strategic infrastructure. For Hornich's operations in 2023 to 2024, wow, been going a long time, members of the regiment have already been awarded 2 orders of Bogdan Khmelnytsky. That's obviously a medal. The Hornich operations themselves are complex multi-stage missions. First, reconnaissance drones are launched to identify air defense positions and signals intelligence stations. Then come decoy drones that distract the attention of the air defense systems. Strike drones such as the AN-196 Lyuti attack electronic warfare systems, creating a corridor for the Hornich. Only after that does a bomber drone set off for its target, covering hundreds of kilometers. Thus, on the night of October the 6th, Hornich flew about 1,000 kilometers, dropped 220 millimeter mortar bombs and an OFAB 100-120 on the Yakov Sverdlov factory in Russian Dzержinsk near Nizhny Novgorod, and then dove kamikaze style into the target. Wow. So okay, that's really cool. So it drops 2 mortar bombs. Let's do a little bit of damage. I don't know what it was. It was was that kind of munitions factory, do some damage with those mortar bombs, drop a much bigger high fragmentation explosive bomb, bang, and then, well, we're not flying back because we've already flown 1,000 kilometers here, so we're out of fuel, so we're driving this bad boy into that place over there. So actually it becomes 4 munitions there. It can drop 3 munitions, 2 small ones, a medium-sized one, and then it becomes a munition itself by kamikaze into whatever it can. It dove kamikaze style onto the target. At the Enterprise, the Russians produced explosives and filled fab bombs for aircraft with them. A few hours later, a second drone repeated the attack, and the next day, another 7 Hornets drones completed the mission. Holy cow, and this is what we don't hear. We don't hear about the successes and what was involved in hitting them and how many were taken out. Such strikes inflict serious damage on Russia's military-industrial complex, on factories, arsenals, and facilities of the oil and gas complex. Hornich himself estimates the total losses inflicted on the occupiers at between $3 and $5 billion. And I presume that's just from his little unit there. So absolutely phenomenal stuff. Really, really important. Right. Onto Russian stuff now. Russia has begun using rocket-propelled guided glide bombs against Ukraine, with air forces calling them resembling cruise missiles. NATO and Ukraine are testing advanced defenses, radar, AI, and drone interceptors to protect civilians and soldiers. So, and now that these guided glide bombs are becoming more and more like cruise missiles, I guess, does it make them more vulnerable, or are they just as hard to shoot down, or are they easier to shoot down now than just the bog standard guided glide bombs? But anyway, air defenses are starting to take out these guided glide bombs, and they need to, because they are a real scourge, and they're starting to hit cities much further back because their range has been increased so significantly. We know that the French and Germans are together are working on and some kind of interception for these guided glide bombs, and already they are being intercepted. But I don't know what. It's just bog standard air defense. I don't know, Nazan's missiles, or the Raven using the AMRAAMs, the AIM-9X missiles from the Nazans, whatever it is. Some of them are getting shot down, but it could be something new. I don't know. So we also heard, and I reported this morning, that Russians have begun hanging 2 containers with anti-tank mines under the wings of their Shaheds, according to Serhiy Flashtenenko. According to him, several such cases have already been recorded today, and I presume that means that they are dropping them rather than kamikazing with just extra explosives on board to give a bigger bang. I presume this is dropping mines well behind Ukrainian lines, and as in right near Kiev or whatever, causing potentially lots of damage to anyone, and that, I'm pretty sure, must be fairly war crimey. Right, I'm going to show you some incredible footage now of this. This is the Terminator. So the Terminator is the Russian vehicle based on the BMP, which is supposedly like one of the B. It's not the Armata one. It is based on the BMP chassis, I think, but it's supposed to be this kind of like, the pride of their sort of armored vehicles, used predominantly, or supposed to be used predominantly in urban kind of warfare. Goes around, has these autocannons that absolutely rake the surroundings, and then has some ATGMs and stuff on board. But when you actually look closely at the BMP-T, as it's called, the Terminator, you can see that the guns are absolute gash. I mean, this is just rubbish. What Tatragami said this morning was hilarious, but I can't repeat it. It's a bit rude. But look at these things jiggle around. Right, that's their very best, weapon here, and it's all over the shot, and there's no stabilization going on. This is a Bushmaster gun, not the Bushmaster infantry fighting vehicle, but the Bushmaster gun for the Bradley. Look at how stable it is. It's not moving at all, right? And I presume that's going to improve its accuracy. Now, not that these things are snipers, but they are just, firing rounds all over the shop. So, maybe it doesn't make that much difference at the end of the day. But what a difference between those two cannons there. And loads of people are talking about this. This is really doing the rounds at the moment, comparing the stability of the Russian BMP-T Terminator dual 30mm to A42 cannons from the new Russian promo video. So they bring out this promo video, but actually people are going, really? And the Bradley's 25mm M242 Bushmaster cannon. Really? I mean, that's nothing to be proud of. That's jiggling all over the shop. Jakub Janovsky says, I have no idea how Russia managed to design such a piece of junk in the 21st century. I'm convinced that the BMP-T has worse accuracy than decades-old BMP-2s, that it should be, you know, well replacing. Anyway, there is that. And then we're just going to finally leave you with the news that, and I've been reporting on this more and more recently. I think there's some further news to this coming out from the Oh, no, this is actually going back. No, but people keep recycling this. Yeah, so the article is about the Kremlin preparing to mobilize reservists, which I talked about previously, with a formal call up as its paid recruitment system collapses. Oh, no, actually, I think they have changed the law. No, I don't have it. So this was linked in another post that's saying they've changed the law. So the news is that they have actually changed the law to call up reservists, I think. So you're going to see all year round quasi mobilization taking place, not like the full national mobilization like they saw in September 2022, but the Russians are doing everything they can to get boots on the ground, and they're going to be forcing reservists into fighting. And although I don't think they're allowed to put them on the front lines, they can have them back in Russia, but they're going to be trying to press scan them into signing like full-on contracts to fight on the front line. So that is going to be a challenge for the Ukrainians, as the Russians are going to be able to access more people, but obviously that comes with its own ramifications to Russia's social morale and workforce, so on and so forth. Anyway, that's enough from me. It's a bit of a bumper episode, lots to go through. Hopefully it was useful and of interest. Thank you so much for your support. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.